All right, so we had just left off where here's the rubric, and we're going to go for 9 points. But I can tell you those outside evidence ones are going to be hard, at least on this DBQ. All right, first thing let's talk about is contextualization. After having graded AP world exams for maybe 11, 12 years, I don't even know, and the DBQ, I think 4 of those years, most kids cannot get the contextualization point. They just can't. But I'm going to work on that. And what I intend to do for my students in AP World and AP European, remember this is an open book, open note test. I intend to give you very detailed notes on timelines and stuff to help you get this point. And the College Board has said that, they're going to have rules in place to keep you from cheating. And so I know a lot of kids think they can go Google this stuff, but I expect the kids that go out and try to Google answers to not have, A, they may get caught. I don't know how, but they may get caught. And B, they're going to run out of time. So I intend to provide this for my kids. This is actually a very hard point to get. But here's what I did. I brainstormed everything I knew about Cuba. Okay? And you can pause this and look at this, but I just dumped everything I knew about it. And some people want just a very short contextualization. It needs to be at least 3 sentences long, and I like to go big picture. So I figure I want the person grading this essay to go, dang, this kid knows a lot about Cuba. And I want them to give me the point without even thinking about it. I want them to do the same thing for you. So I'm going to click on the next slide. And what you're going to see is the very beginning of your introduction. And it's going to be big. And there it is. And you can see most of the facts that I put there. Again, you can pause this and look at this. I think there's some typos in here. That's okay. I'm going to leave them. What you're doing here essentially on your DBQ is a rough draft. I've graded thousands of these things. They're ugly, they're sloppy, they're crossed out, but I know how to get contextualization, and this will do it. You can get contextualization for doing what happened before, during, or after, but almost nobody does anything that works other than before. Okay, I mean, you can get it the other ways, but nobody does that. So I gave them basically a whole history of Cuba. And again, we're going to go on. Now, the next thing is going to be the thesis. All right, so my students, I know this is ugly, but I told you I was in a hurry, is I make my kids do this thing called a DBQ chart. You may not want to do it, but as I was going through, I come up with these 3 groups here, this chart. And what I do is you go through and you see documents, you put them in here. And what you see here is A is better, and under there are documents 2 and 8. B is worse. I've got 6 and 10, and C is gender relations. Back in the day, you used to have 2 documents to make a group. Now, you don't have to. You can have a group with 1 document, and that's why group C has just 1 document, number 3. It is likely that you can do 2 groups and do a 2-part thesis and get credit on this exam. But I'm expecting if there's 5 documents, to be 2, 2, and 1. But apparently it will not keep you from passing. That's the theory anyway. This is all theory. So here's how else you could have done it. Either way is fine. But as you're reading these documents, you need to be trying to group them because they're going to lead. We've already got 1 point now. Remember, we're headed for 9. We got 1 point for contextualization. Now, I'm going to do a 3-point thesis saying these things. And you don't want to just say good, bad, and ugly, or better or worse, or fair, poor, and horrible. You want to make it sound a little bit better than that. But when I click, you're going to see my thesis. So here we go. And what you see here, and again, I'm not going to read it to you. You can pause it, but you can see me saying in different words exactly what I'd said before. And I tell my kids all the time, my students, that the ugly theses are better. The little short ones like I taught my students when I was an English teacher are not very detailed. Give them a complicated thesis that struggles. Let them hear you thinking. Let them hear you trying to answer the question. Trust me, after having graded these for years, these readers want to give you the point. Very few kids in the United States can really write a decent thesis. This is one thing I think that my kids are actually pretty good at. Make sure you throw the years back out there. So you see right there, I basically took the prompt, reworded it, threw it back out, and gave 3 answers. Point number 2. Now, outside evidence, I'm just going to go ahead and do this, and this is tough. And I happen to know a lot about socialism and a lot about Cuba. I was born in Miami. Hi, Leah. My best friends were named Mario and Aldo. I grew up fascinated with socialism and Cuba, socialism in general, and Cuba in particular. And so I know a lot about this. I would not expect most of my kids to get this. But here's what you have to do to get the outside evidence points. You have to make your argument. You already seen my arguments. It made life for them better. It made it worse, and it caused strain between the genders. So to get the outside evidence, you have to come up with something else that would make your point. And if you do a 3-part thesis in 3 body paragraphs, you have 3 chances to get this. If you do it 2 times right, you get 2 points. But this is the hardest thing, at least for my students, on the essay. The contextualization is the next hardest thing, but I think I have a plan for that. So anyway, if this overwhelms you, don't worry about it. We've got 4 weeks to worry about this. So I'm just going to click, and I'm going to show you, before we get to the body paragraphs, all 3 outside evidences I came up with. Now remember what you're going to do. You're going to have a topic sentence that refers back to the thesis. You got A, B, and C in the thesis. You're going to have 3 body paragraphs. Topic sentence A is going to go back to A. It's almost this, and you can word it exactly the same if you want. Because remember, one of your points is for argumentation. So if you tell the people, I'm going to make 3 points in this essay, and then you list the point and come up with your facts, you're going to get the argumentation point. Okay, that's what we're going for here. Those are the easiest points on the DBQ. So this, and at the end of that body paragraph, you're going to throw this argument in. For those of you in my class that this week are going to start writing these, I expect these to be ugly, but I want you to attempt it, to try to come up with something that helps make the point. So remember, my points were better, worse, and caused strain between the gender. So here's what I came up with. Okay, I know this is a lot dropping down like this. I happen to know right in the middle of this coronavirus outbreak that Cuba is sending medical teams all over the world to help people. And that, as a matter of fact, the United States government is actually trying to block them because the U.S. government, a capitalist country, does not want socialist Cuba to be seen as successful. Again, if we had gotten to this in history and you'd learned about the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis and all these other issues, you'd know why if you know why there's so many Cuban Americans living in South Florida, you'll understand this is a hot bone of contention. But anyway, they're sending their teams all around the world, so they must have good medical care. And these medical teams are full of female doctors. So I would throw this sentence in at the end of my first body paragraph. Notice you got an A here, just an attempt to get that point. And maybe they will have mercy on you. I don't have time because I'm trying to keep this under 15. Well, actually, I'll go ahead. If you know someone who does the pole jump, you can set the bar high or the bar low. And at the AP reading every year, when we talk about the different points, when we grade them, we discuss whether we're going to have a high bar or low bar. Most years on the DBQ, the theses are so bad they have a low bar. That's the reason I'm convinced that my kids that do a 3-part thesis are going to get the point. Because generally, a lot of kids make one silly sounding point and we give them credit. That's called low bar. I'm expecting this outside evidence to be so tough this year that if you attempt, you're very likely to get it because they're going to have a low bar. Okay. The second one says, hey, we're talking about, did it make life for women better or worse, or how did it affect them? Well, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have fled Cuba. So they must be fleeing because things are bad. Many of them have drowned trying to come across the Florida Straits into Florida. And so I'm going to state that there. Again, be careful how you word it, but throw it in there, hey, so things must not be that good down there if they're leaving. And you're going to see, I make the point, there's not a whole lot of Americans swimming down towards Cuba because obviously most of us consider things better here than they are there. And the last one is, remember, this is gender relations. I brought up this famous case of Elian Gonzalez, which probably you would have learned about in APUSH, in AP World, and maybe AP European, had your teachers gotten this far. But his parents were, I guess, divorced. His mother put him on a boat and tried to get him here to Florida, and the boat sank. I don't know the whole story, but she drowned. He made it here to Florida, and it became a big deal about his father down in Cuba wanted him back. And so finally, the United States government, after immense political pressure, took the boy away from his cousins and aunts and uncles in Miami. They actually sent the federal marshals in at gunpoint to capture this kid and send him back to Cuba. And it was an international incident. And it shows that there must have been trouble between the gender. Again, this is the hardest part. Let's move on. Okay, body paragraph number 1. This is my paragraph that says things were better. I'm going to start with a topic sentence. So I'm just going to click here. Here it is, and you can pause it and read it, and then I'll explain what you're seeing. Okay, so the first thing you see, the Cuban Revolution made women's lives better in many ways. That's a topic sentence. I want you to go ahead and put an A for my students because it just shows you're making your point here back from the thesis. This is where you're going to get the argumentation. There's 2 points for argumentation. And so what happens is I start describing document 2. Do not quote the document. Just talk about it. Discuss it. What does it show? And notice that the document number is, I put in parentheses, but I tell my students they must circle it. That I automatically dock points if they're not circled. I want the reader, as soon as they look at your essay, to see 7 documents circled on that paper. So they can, because they have to count how many documents you use. That's part of grading it. So they can look right there and see that you've done 7. Anyway, here's my rule. Spend at least 3 sentences describing how it makes your point. Then do your CAPS point of view argument, and you'll see that in there. Do your CAPS, and it's 2-part. Here we go on the first one. Her audience was likely interested in women's issues. I say she's head of the Cubans women's group. That's the first part. I'm putting my hands up again. And then she may have overstressed the change women went through because she's probably speaking to a group of women interested in women's issues, maybe men interested in women's issues. And that would get you the point for sourcing. Anyway, you see me doing the same thing with number 8. Now, document 8, I spent at least 3 sentences describing what it means and how it makes my point. But I didn't do caps on that one. And then I go with my outside evidence quote. Okay, so moving on here. I didn't do all 3 body paragraphs in it because I was in a hurry. I just did the first one and the third one. Okay, so here's body paragraph number 3. Here's a topic sentence. It made gender relations worse. You can read this. You can pause it and read it. You can see where I do I analyze his point of view there. And then you see my outside evidence. Okay. All right. Moving on here. All right. Summing up the points. This thing is worth 10 points. The unicorn point at the end, we're going to ignore. Only 2% of all students gets that point. It's very likely you can get a 5 if you can get a 9. Most of us believe, a lot of smart readers that I know think it's going to take 6 points. I'm convinced my kids can get to 5. I can tell you most AP World students whose essays I've graded on the DBQs only get 2 or 3 points because they don't do something like, they don't spend 3 sentences per document. They quote the document. They don't know how to write a thesis. They ignore contextualization. But let's sum up the points. We did a great contextualization, 1 point. We did a 3-part thesis, 1 point. Now, the third document is, did you discuss 2 documents? Did you just discuss them? That's the easiest point of all. Absolutely, we did that. And then there's 2 more points if you argued with 2 documents. Now, because I left a paragraph out, I argued with 2 documents in body paragraph 1 and 1 document with body paragraph number 3. So technically, if this was all I did, I wouldn't get the point. But if I had done the second body paragraph, I would have used 2 more documents. And so if you had done what we did here in the other body paragraph, you're up to 5 points now. In the 3 documents we did 2 caps. I suggest you do caps in every single document. So we're going to get up to, in other words, this is what you call an asset-based exam. If you try it 5 times and get it right only twice, it still counts. Those 2 count. That gives us 7 points. I don't know if they would take my outside evidence or not. I can't hold my fingers up, but that would give us up to a 9. And at this point, we're going to stop. If you can get a 9 out of 10 on this DBQ, my friend, you have done well.